This time I have Taru on the show, and Taru is, I'm going to read this out. She's the executive director technology of an Australian bank. She's been in banking for the last 15 odd years, and she has an overall experience of about 22 years. Taru's grown from the entry level, and she's grown to a leadership position. So that's a little bit about what do we do in this call. We explore a whole bunch of stuff. We explore, and I'm just going to go back to my notes and say, we explore stuff like how do we become strategic, right? How does a manager come across as being strategic? How do you build your personal brand, especially if you're not right up at the top, especially if you're just starting out, especially if you're just about become a manager? How do you build your personal brand? What's important? Or take, for instance, what if you get into an interview when somebody asks you, okay, as a manager, what's your 30, 60, and 90-day plan? What do you say such that you can really cinch the interview then and there? Or what are some really important interview questions and get asked in a whole bunch of interviews in different kind of avatars? And if you really reflect on that, how can you bear a favorable impression on the interviewer? How to manage your time, how to manage your energy, and lots more. So sit back and enjoy lots of learning. Good afternoon, Taru. Hi.
Hi, Greg. Good afternoon.
Thank you for taking time out. And let's start with a little overview of how you started your professional journey and what's been a couple of highlights and then from there.
Yeah, sure, Greg. So, in terms of my corporate journey, I've been into the industry for 22 plus years now. At this point in time, I'm playing the role of head of technology for one of the businesses in an Australian bank in India. In terms of my journey, I'm an engineer by background. I started as a developer.
Right.
I was very passionate about technology. I experimented with a lot of different technologies early on in my career. And then, roughly 15 years back, I joined one of the banks. I didn't realize I'll be staying there for so long. So I spent 15 years with my last bank. And I performed a lot of different roles as part of my last organization. From a developer to a business analyst, project manager, development manager. And last decade, I've been into leadership roles. It has been about building capability out of India, more and more ownership and accountability out of India. And in terms of highlight of my career was when I was performing the global head of technology role out of India, wherein I was directly facing off to all my global stakeholders. I had global teams working out of Chennai, Bangalore, Gurgaon, and London. So it was a different experience in terms of leading teams in various locations rather than just the ones sitting next to you.
Yeah.
And yes, I think the whole ownership, accountability that came with that was immensely powerful. So that was the highlight of my career.
Nice. So you mentioned technology, and that's where you got into, and then you got into leadership roles about a decade ago. So that's been a long time. What is your sense of the relationship between technology and leadership? So as you become a leader, does your reliance on technology go down? The way you're problem solving, are you using technology to do problem solving? Are you using technology because I imagine as you enter an organization, you're using technology. Whatever the technology is. So it could be, let's say, in the IT bit of it, or if you're let's say into finance, then you have technical skills as finance per se. How do you invoice? How to do the taxes, and so on and so forth. If you're into manufacturing, then your technical skills, as opposed to technology, is your assembly line and moving the machines and getting things done. So that's a skill. So you're using technical skills to problem solve, to prove yourself. As you move up, what role do technical skills play as you become a leader and as you grow as a leader?
So I think technical role and skills are very, very relevant even as you go up the ladder. I think gone are those days wherein you were just operating factory lines, so you just had to manage a bunch of people. I think senior roles are about managing bigger organizations, but also it is about defining the strategy which the against which your teams need to deliver, right? So as you grow up, the size of problems or the amount of ambiguity that you have to deal with uh, changes, right? It increases, right? If you look at technology today, how fast it is evolving, you really have to keep up the pace, otherwise you'll be left behind. So you really have to keep yourself up to speed in terms of what's happening around you. So what are the new threats and opportunities that are emerging on a day-to-day basis? And you can do that only if you keep yourself very sound from your technical or domain perspective.
Okay, so what I hear you say is that you're probably not using your technical skills to solve problems, but your relationship with technical understanding in your case technology is used to uncover where can innovation happen. What is my competition doing? How can I do the same thing and what's possible with the existing technology? So, and then you're probably getting it done, but your understanding of what all can happen, technology and knowing technology is kind of indispensable. That's kind of what I use.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, from the bulk of options that are available, right? Which ones to pick and choose? Where is that you want to put the money, right? So you can do that only if you understand your domain, where your technology is well, right? Because the time to market has to be very, very fast, and you have to remain cost efficient as well. So in order to do that, you have to make smart choices all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So volume into half. All right. So now I'm going to jump directly in as is preparing for this. Someone I was speaking with told me that, when you got into a senior leadership role, then one of the questions that you were asked was 30, 60, what is your, as you get into this role, what is your 30-day, 60-day, 90-day plan? How are you going to come at this? How are you going to add value in the role? But specifically, in what's your 30, 60-day plan? Now, I thought that's a great question. And even that person thought that the way you responded to that was amazing. And I think it's important because in a whole bunch of interviews, especially as you're climbing up, that's a question that you will get asked a whole bunch of times. And your response to that question could be a deciding factor of whether you qualify for that role. Of course, in your case, you were already in that role. But that could be the defining factor of kind of a make or break thing. So to me, that's a very important question. So how do you approach a question like what's your 30-day, 60-day, 90-day plan? Because you don't know too much about, you're just getting into it. What does the role require? What are the important things, the big rocks? You don't know that. So how do you attempt a question of that? What's happening in your mind when you respond to a question like that?
So yeah, I think that's a very good question. So when you're joining a new organization and you have to think of the 30, 60, 90-day plan, my personal view is that it is not about disrupting. It is about, it's a discovery phase for you, right? So it's about discovering and asking the right questions to see if there was certain reasons why certain things are not happening, or is it an oversight where a value add creation that can happen. So I specifically feel that it is when you come in, you've got a new starter lens things. I think that's a very, very valuable period, because before you become part of the system, you have to make observations, right? And share the observations in a positive fashion to understand the underlying reasons why certain gaps exist or certain opportunities are not being tapped. Yeah. So I think in a new role, it will be a lot about discovering, forming relationships, and finding areas wherein you should create value.
So how do you make these observations? Because you're also a new kid on the block, and everybody's viewing you as, oh, this is a new person. Let's see, there's a little bit of testing happening. Or she doesn't know the stuff. Maybe she's not the right fit. So, how are you dealing with all of that?
So, again, great question. So, my view is, I think your listening skills are very, very important, right? So, when you're forming relationships with people, more than talking, listening is very important. So, I think listening, empathizing, and then putting your points across in a very polished fashion, which doesn't seem like challenging or threatening them, but more about being curious, asking questions, and putting points across wherein you identify differences, right? And let them see that, oh wow, it's a great idea, it's a great food for thought, rather than then feeling threatened by different thought process that you bring in. So I think it's an art of both listening and making observation of the differences or opportunities, and how you put them across plays a key role in becoming a trusted advisor vis-a-vis being seen as a threat.
So, if you can think of an example where you toned down the threat, you wanted to put something where there was a little bit of a difference in opinion, if you can, it's totally unscripted, this question, like most of the questions. So, what happened? You went there, this was a difference in opinion, this is what you asked, and you were aware that it could blow up, and the person might get defensive, but because you were careful of how you're coming across, that didn't happen and stuff, right? So and also I want to bundle a second question as you think through that also. Okay, when you're making your plan, you're saying, "Okay, there are some observations and listening," and I'm saying listening will be in the context of some questions. So do you just walk up to a stakeholder and say, "Hey, I want to know more about so and so. Tell me about more," or tell me what's your priority. And why I ask this question is because if I come to you and ask you a very direct question, Taru, how are you? Typically, everyone says, "I'm fine." Even though at the back of the mind, they had a bad day, not slept too well, don't like your face, etc., etc. But the response is going to be, "I'm fine." So what I'm really saying is sometimes, as I'm sure you've experienced, direct questions don't get you the real responses and the underlying root causes and stuff. So I bundled a whole bunch of things. What I'm really saying is, if you can think of an example of how we manage that, and or if you could tell me that, how do you go and make those observations? What are the kind of questions? What's your kind of approach? So whichever one you want to respond.
So, Greg, I think you made a very, very good point around the fact that if you ask very close-ended questions, you get very short and crisp answers back from certain individuals. So I think the first art is to ask open-ended questions, right? I think preparing for meetings, right? Even if it is just a one-to-one is very, very important, right? So by virtue of the role of a person, you would know where the overlap is, right? So introducing yourself in a right way so that there is some credibility that is set at the start of the conversation. Being curious in terms of the role the person is playing, how long the person has been with the organization, what is the person expecting of the role that you're going to play, will build some credibility and the relationship. And then coming to the point, asking about what are the challenges that they see, what are the things that are going well. So people of more than listening, I think people like to talk. So touching upon topics that may be of interest to them, right, so that they get to talk, express themselves. Because for you, more than talking, it is listening that is important, right? So I think preparation, asking open-ended questions, touching upon areas that the person may be passionate about. And some of it can't be prepared. Of course, at runtime, you have to pick the questions that you have to ask. But I think the first few conversations are very important in terms of understanding where the person is coming from and where the overlaps.
If you can just think back to a time, when you first joined up in this organization, something, and you were there. So how did you prepare? What were you asking yourself? And did you just go up to the person and say, "So what are your challenges?" How did you figure out what's, like you're saying, it's important to figure out what's important to this person. So how do you figure out, hey, this is like Greg sitting in front of you, what's important to this guy? What's the process of figuring that out?
So I think when you go into a conversation, you may, in the first conversation, you may know the title of the person. So you could start by introducing yourself and what the experience that you bring in, what is the role that you're going to play, And then you can ask that, I would like to understand more about the role. And I would like to understand that where we're going to overlap. Yes, yes. So let that person talk what the role is all about. And then you could ask that, oh, you're dealing with such a varied stakeholders. How do you manage that? So I think take to certain conversations wherein, there could be certain areas where you can express empathy, right? You can ask about the challenges that are the person is facing. I think typically when you touch upon these two things, you will get the conversation going.
I think some powerful questions. So what is your role? Open-ended right there. And then going deeper, what are the overlaps?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that gets a person talking because you're not saying what's going on.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
saying what are the overlaps?
Yes.
As soon as a person is saying, okay, this is my role, this is your role. Yeah, these are the overlaps. Because I'm also thinking that a whole bunch of times when the overlaps are happening, I'm thinking this is your role. You're thinking this is my role.
Yeah.
And there's this no man's land, no woman's land, kind of a space in the middle, and things begin to fall in the cracks. So I think that's a really nice question. And as a follow-up question, what's your role? And what are some of the overlaps? And I'm just saying, for people listening to this, straight out of the gate, I think there's value there. And the third one is, so what are your who are your stakeholders?
Yeah, so when you understand the role, you would know what are the sticky areas of that role, right? So empathizing on that sticky area for sure will get the person talking.
So some nice so what I've actually written down is 3 important questions that could help you respond to that 30-60, that could help you craft your 30, 60, 90-day plan. But I also think that it goes a little beyond that. And it moves more towards, a lot of times people ask you, how do you build enduring relationships?
Yeah.
This is start at that. How do you build?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. See, this is to know people and build relationships so that eventually you get to know what is important to them.
Yeah.
Right? Your 30, 60-day plan will come eventually once you understand your ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right? So this is one step towards getting into new conversations, new relationships with people who are important stakeholders for you. Yeah. And once you know them better, their priorities, thereafter you will have enough food for thought to create your 30, 60, 90-day plan.
And then you're probably going back to them and checking,
yes,
and seeing what. So I think, like you mentioned earlier, how do you close the loop and how do you go back and how do you connect?
Yeah.
All right. So I'll change gears and move a little ahead with that and say, as I was preparing for this interview, a lot of people told me that whether it is 9 o'clock in the morning, 5 in the evening, your energy levels are kind of up there, right? Now, as I deal with a lot of people tell me, there's no time to do this, and our energy levels are going low. And as growth is happening, there are so many more asks and demands of your time, right? So how do you keep your energy levels up? How are you? Is it that you're managing your time differently? Is it that you're doing something else? How are you managing your energy levels when you do so many, like you said, global drone, local drone, so yeah.
So, interesting question, Greg. I think the answer to this question will be two-pronged approach. So the first one is, I think, knowing yourself better. I think that is very important. Right? We talk about time management. I think equally important is energy management.
Yes.
So, be it physically, mentally, emotionally, there are bits that will charge your energy and there are bits that will drain your energy. So you need time for introspection to understand where your energy is getting drained and where your energy gets recharged, right? The areas where the energy is getting drained, you need to understand the why behind it, and then you have to manage it actively, right? So through this, you can manage energy around yourself. The second thing is that if you are asked to execute somebody else's idea, vis-a-vis you are executing your own idea, I think it is no-brainer that you will be more energetic and excited about ideas that have come from you, right? So making sure during the day or during your week, months, you are focusing on things that are important to you, right? And for that, you need to demonstrate thought leadership, that you're able to think what is important. You are able to influence people that it is important and hence they're bought into it. And C, then you're taking some action on back of it, right? So as you do that, your energy levels will be high. So I think using both in terms of introspecting and managing myself better, plus making sure that, I'm not just executing what the other people have told me, but I think of my own ideas, influence people, and make sure I am and my team are working on my ideas, make sure that my energy levels are high through the day.
So I'm going to ask you to give me an example of how you figured out, this is where I get my energy, and this is where I get drained of energy, and some of the things that you let go of or you relegated it out, and how you're doing more of, what gives you energy. But before I go there, what I hear, I just wanted to close that response to yours. I had a thought in my mind saying that what I therefore hear you say is one of the ways of managing energy is like, earlier you said, go figure out what's important to other people. But then doing a good job, finding your work meaningful is not only about dancing to another person's tune.
Yeah.
It's not only about, maybe that came out too harsh. It's not only about taking care of other people's priorities, but understanding my priority, figuring out their priorities, and then it's like a good dance, like, call it a bit of a jugalbandi, a nice little dance happening where I'm not letting go of what's important to me, what I like doing, what gives me energy, and yet at the same time, I'm also keeping the other person's priorities in mind. And I'm seeing how the twain can meet.
Yeah.
Is
Absolutely.
is what I hear you say. Good. So going back, so if you can give us some examples of how did you get awareness? Hey, you know what? This 45 minutes or whatever time in the morning, or even if it's not time bound, this thing, if I do at so and so time, or this thing, if I just do, that gives me amazing energy. And this thing, or this person, or this space, if I engage with or in, then that's kind of drawing, sapping my energy. And I'm going to back away from that because it's very easy to say, okay, don't do. But then, a whole bunch of times you just can't stop doing something because whether it's our own inclination, whether it's some dependencies on us, so it's really tough to execute. So what's been your experience in that?
So, in terms of how I manage my energy, I realize that, I have to keep myself physically fit. So irrespective of how my busy schedule is, I'm making sure that every morning I'm getting up and doing my exercises, right? Other thing which is very important to me is going through some spiritual text when I wake up in the morning, right? Because it just allows me to gain something different every day and remain myself focused on certain good food for thought. So on this note, to take an example, I hardly watch any OTT content unless there's something to learn out of it, because what I've realized is that things which are unreal may sound fun, but they just really distract my mind, right? So I would rather look at something which is real, real life based, inspiring, motivating, so that, I've got good food for thought left in my mind, right? So the other thing could be, I know I'm a morning person, right? So irrespective of what good intentions I have, I know I can do only so much when it comes to late evening. So I know when I'm my best, I know when is most important stuff to be done, things like, my thinking time. So I make sure that I do it in the morning before I get into my daily routine, because thereafter, you're part of the chaos or you're part of the flow. That will not give you enough time to think. So, and one last example I want to take is like, say if you have an emotional setback, right? So I know that if I've got some good sounding boards around me, I can come out of it.
Wow.
Right? So it's about knowing things that can take away your energy, and then finding out the ways wherein you can manage these situations better, because these detractors will be inevitable. You just need to know how to manage it.
So just to summarize what you said, because a whole lot of good stuff happened there. And I have not read too much of this thing, the time management books, and I don't hear you talk about quadrant 1, quadrant 2, right? That's a good framework, of course. But what I hear you say is, first go figure, stuff like what person are you? Are you a morning person, evening person, right? So listening to your energy levels, I think that's when I say what kind of person are you. when do you do your thinking best, morning, evening? And as you were saying that, what I also gleaned is that when you're planning, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you're planning, your planning is happening at two different levels. I'm making a whole bunch of this up. Let me know if I'm right or wrong. One of the levels you're planning is happening is at a tactical level. Okay, this is what has to be done. This call has to be made. Follow-up to be done. But I also, the minute you said, I'm also thinking about, what all are the priorities and all. I'm also thinking that, you look at zooming out and say, hey, where do I want to go?
Yep.
What kind of big rocks do I want to accomplish?
Yes.
Have I kind of...
Yeah, absolutely. You always have to maintain the balance between your strategic thinking and things that have to be solved today, right? Otherwise,
So when you're doing strategic thinking, what are one or two things that you're thinking of? So for example, let me just unpack that. So for example, are you saying, from a global level, what needs to be done? Or who are my clients? Do I want better clients? Do I want different clients? Do I want to farm this account? So what is your strategic thinking looking like? What are the kind of questions you're asking in your mind?
so I think, there is no one good way to do this. You have to use your own personal style to bring in the thinking. Personally, how I approach this is like out of many dimensions that I will see where the difference can be made. One of the dimensions could be what are the problems that are setting today. If you are delivering 2x, right, what will it take to deliver 5x, right? If today this is the cost that is being spent, how can I reduce my cost, right? So this is one lens that, wherever we are today, how do I improve it, right? Time to market, underlying cost, etc., etc. The other lenses that I know, to take an example, I know generative AI is a real thing now, right? So being aware in terms of what are the problems that generative AI is can be used to solve for, and where is the overlap that exists within my world, and thinking about it. So basically, looking from the lens of opportunities, wherein the new developments that are happening around your ecosystem can be leveraged. So I think these are certain dimensions in which I would think and come up with certain ideas where time could be spent.
So I'm just trying to make a principle out of that, a kind of a construct out of that. So what I hear you say is you're sitting down looking at saying, hey, what are the problems facing me? And then what are the problems at different levels? What are the problems at, let's say, like a business scorecard level? What's the problem with creating revenues, cost? Well, where can I reduce the cost? What are some problems happening there? Customers, perhaps. So what are some problems that I could fix? So that's one thing I hear. This other thing I hear you say is what are the trends? And then the word I think it repeats itself, overlaps. Like so, first overlaps between. I'm saying that is an important word now. Overlaps between my stakeholder and me and my and the priorities. But now I also say overlaps between why you said AI and so forth. But what are the trends happening out there? What's the innovations happening out there? So being aware of that.
Yeah.
And saying, hey, in my world, what are some things that I could use? There are overlaps. Maybe my competition is using. So these are a couple of things that I'm taking away when you're saying how do you manage your energy? I mean, not manage energy. How are you thinking big picture? How are you thinking strategic?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And it is important that whatever you come out of this analysis, when you are connecting with your stakeholder, you vet with them to ensure that out of all the ideas that you have, which is of the highest priority, because you can do only so much.
And then this goes back to that same question saying, how do you figure out from a stakeholder that what's his priority is or her priorities? You don't just go and say, what's a priority? You're saying, what's your role? What are the overlaps? And now you've done your thinking. And I think that just connecting the dot back that you mentioned earlier on, that prepare for that meeting. So this thinking time that you have in the morning is helping you actually prepare for that meeting.
Yeah.
To help you with your to-dos, but for that meeting. So that when you've done this thinking, my experience is that when you're meeting a CEO, and if you tell the CEO, okay, tell me your problems, that, just going open-ended sends out the message, you've not done your homework,
And
right? And you want to make a good impression, at least when in the beginning of a relationship, that, hey, I've come prepared.
Yeah.
So when you're doing it this way, you say, hey, what about 1, 2, 3, 4 things? How are you ranking them? Where the problems emerging? Is this a problem over here?
Yeah.
Just shows that
yeah, absolutely.
you've done your thinking.
Yes, you're back on, correct.
Oh, amazing. So I think that really answers a big question that gets thrown around, talked about, trained about, coached about. How does one think strategic? And I've heard a whole bunch of times, think strategic. That's what managers are always telling the direct reports at different levels. And people find it so difficult to think strategically. And here you are kind of debunking what the hell being strategic means and how to do that. So that's cool. So the first one is figuring out, just going back to the response of how do I manage my energy, figuring out what kind of a person you are, then doing a little bit of strategic thinking with, if you're thinking strategic in the long run, it free up your energy, and having some sort of spiritual practice.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you read?
So, I have gone through a lot of different kind of texts. Like last few months, I've been reading Bhagavad Gita. So, yeah. So I'm trying to go, and I've also started reading Chanakya Niti as well. But it's just that when you read these texts, it's not just about reading. There is a lot of self reflection that you need to do. To see what it means, because when you're reading a version, you would typically read stuff from the lens of the author, but you have to take time to go through each and every content carefully and reflecting and taking certain things in you so that you can make it part of your practice.
Yeah, and the West has written so much about management, but hold on a second. We had this since time immemorial.
Yeah.
We, when it comes to management, we're constantly thinking about Michael Porter, Peter Drucker, Cotter, etc., etc. Nothing wrong in that, but very few times are we also thinking of what's under our noses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Out of a very rich Indian text culture, thought process. The difference, I think, and please let me know how you think about it. The difference is Western management ideas, fundas are very linear. There's a principle: do this, get this, do this, get that, formula. This plus this plus it circles. I'm thinking Jim Collins. These 3 circles where they meet at the intersection, that's where you should formulate your big, hairy, audacious goals. But Indian text differs in as much as it's not so in your face. It's not so, go do this most of the time. It's like,
Yes. Yeah.
where do the dots match?
Yes.
Where do they connect?
Yes. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I think there's a lot of emphasis laid in terms of thinking, introspecting, finding what is right for you, because we operate in a world of gray rather than black and white.
Right.
So I think Indian methodology is different. Also, the fact that Eastern cultures believe in life after death. So they believe that whatever you have achieved in this life is actually nothing, right? Which is quite different from how probably the thought process is there in Western cultures, wherein in this one life you need to achieve a lot. So
Everything.
yeah. So the underlying principles are quite different. So the entire methodology of how you look at things completely changes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think these are quite subjective. What works for you? Like one simple text from Bhagavad Gita, wherein they said that do not focus on the outcome, focus on the action. We might have heard it so many times, but I wonder how many times do we practice it?
Yeah.
Right? But it is immensely powerful, because the moment your focus shifts away from the target, the focus is on the effort. It takes away a lot of stress, because you're just focusing on doing the right thing, because it says the right outcomes will follow, right? While I feel if you go via the Western philosophies, there's a lot of focus on goals And but when you go by the Indian philosophy, there is a lot of focus on the effort and the action that is being taken.
Yeah, the whole Western idea, YOLO, no, is this upheld as a big principle. You only live once, is upheld as a big principle, and I see that the entire Western literature around management and stuff is on, goal and so much focus on goal. And what I see in the Indian system is not to say that they aren't goal focused, but I think Swami Vivekananda running in my head when he's saying, perhaps it's coming from the Gita, I'm not sure, but yeah, it's important to define your luxury, your goal, and then let it go, and then do your stuff.
Yeah.
Do your responsible action,
Yes.
which will take you there.
Yeah.
But focus is on the process as much as on the
Yeah.
outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. The focus is, you prepare for a certain goal, but you focus thereafter on the effort and the action being taken rather than the focus on the outcome being achieved. So I think that's where the difference lies.
And to ask you a maybe obvious question, do you think this approach is good also, or is also contributing to your energy levels and how you come across?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because if I do not measure myself on the outcome that I've achieved, then, and rather I'm focusing on the effort that I've put or the actions that I've taken. So I'm more content, right? And of course, your energy levels will be higher when you are more content vis-a-vis, you're disgruntled about things that have not been achieved. So, yeah, I think you're right.
Absolutely. So what I hear you saying is not to give up focus, but set the goal and then focus on your efforts. And every little while it ties back to the way you're planning also.
Yeah.
Every little while pull back and say, how are your efforts aligning to where exactly you want to go?
Yeah.
But holding that a little lightly.
Yes, absolutely. To take an example, if you've thought of something different, you talk to the first stakeholder, you don't get a buy-in, so you don't get a setback, right? You just keep trying because your focus is more on the effort that I think that is right and I want to influence, rather than being disappointed by the outcome that you had. That in the first go, the idea wasn't sold, right? So with the same stakeholder, maybe you have to try twice, thrice, more than that. But you keep trying because you think it is right? And you remain calm about it. Right.
Yeah, and then the whole idea of being calm and the personal brand, right? A lot of people, the way the image that they're forming of you is especially in tough times.
Yeah.
How are you staying calm?
Yeah.
Right? And a whole lot of times when somebody walks in, you say, wow, this guy or girl just walks into the room and there's so much of something about that person or so much of gravitas. And I've been trying to unpack that for a whole lot of time. And I think one of the parameters is that, how they function under stress and how they remain calm when everyone else is losing their heads, how they're remaining calm. And I think if we go down the rabbit hole a little deeper, how do you remain calm? I think this is one of the ways that is enabling you to remain calm. And therefore the way, I think this all ties up. I think therefore the way people perceive you is, wow, this involved is calm under pressure and stuff. Interesting. Now, I want to move from here to some case study-like questions. What you did mention was at the beginning, as we started recording, was how you moved up, from an entry level, right, to a senior leadership position, and now along the C-suite lines. And so I want to try and glean out some wisdom with somebody just about getting into the managerial role, or having spent a little, a few years as a manager, could use. So the first one I want to get into, the first case study-ish kind of thing. I hear several times when somebody gets promoted. It's not supposed to be done this way, but a lot of organizations engage in this practice. When somebody gets promoted, excuse me, they're getting promoted from within their friends, within that peer level. So what is happening is that those people who were your peers are no longer your peers. They are now your direct reports. And that causes a whole bunch of heartburn at their level and for you as their manager. I know, as I spoke to some of your direct reports in the past, that you manage this really well.
Hmm.
That's where I want to go. How did you manage it when you were, working at a particular position and then you got promoted? And what a couple of these people told me was that we saw her as as the next level.
Hmm.
So really knowing at a peer level, I mean, that's huge. When your peers are saying, hey, no, but I want to go, I want to get promoted, but like, honestly, heart of heart, we know she's the right person. How do you manage that?
Yeah, so I think very good question, Greg. I think it is very, very important, and it is very often that when you get promoted in a peer group, right? So I think one should be cognizant that you don't demand um, or you don't demand respect by the virtue of the role that you've taken up, or you don't or unduly try to demonstrate your authority. I think to me that is very important. I think first step, I consciously make sure that they're psychologically safe. They understand that they're respected for the roles that they are performing, and I don't mean to intrude or express my unnecessary authority given the fact that I'm going to be playing a different role. So I think providing that psychological safety is very, very important. The second thing is also there has to be a boundary between personal and professional. While they may have been friends, there has to be a professional boundary. So initially it may cause some heartburns with people wherein they feel that they are your good friends and probably they'll have some leverage on back of that, and they don't get that. But trust me, over time they respect you for that. So I think both these bits have to be followed. The third thing is that typically when I start working with a group, be it my peer group or new set of people, I take close few months to make my observations before I share any substantial feedback with them. So because when I was working, say I'm working with my peer, my lens of looking at them would be different from how I look at them when I start managing them. But I take my due time with instances to make my observations, and I do not shy away from sharing that feedback when I think I have enough feedback and I have enough instances.
So you mentioned several things, setting boundaries and stuff that people really struggle with. Not just people, but I think Google did a Project Aristotle, I think it was called. They did this massive research saying what sets high-performing teams apart from the other teams. And they did all kinds of permutation combinations, and one factor stood head and shoulders higher than the other factors, and that was psychological safety. So you kind of spot on there. So setting boundaries and how do you give feedback? I think these are the three biggest pieces, and you're able to crack that. So I just want to spend a little while on that, and I think our first-time managers, even managers, and sometimes even leaders can really benefit from this. So I wanted to ask you, and we'll come back to this question, now that you process it at the back of your mind. Could you give us some examples of how you set the boundary, or how you set a boundary at a particular instance? What happened, what didn't happen? Before we go to that, the psychological safety bit. How do you make something psychologically safe for your team? You're saying tough things. Don't demonstrate authority overly. That's a tough one because you've become an authority figure. So like it or not, you're oozing authority. That's the way people are looking at you. And sometimes you have to take stances. This has to be done. It has to be done. That's why you're there to begin with. You're the captain of the ship to begin with. And the captain of the ship has to take decisions. But on the other hand, you're also saying it's got to be, you've got to be judicious with it. How do you do that? How do you create? So back to my question, how do you create psychological safety in a setting where you've risen from that team and you become manager?
So I think certain steps that I would or typically take is that when people reach out to me asking about certain areas which are being run by one of my directs, I'll just point them to my directs. Right? I don't want to be a unnecessary middle person there.
Yeah.
So because this way it allows my next in line to create their own visibility
Right.
and show their own capacity to provide answers, build their credibility. So I will take a step back there to coach and support wherein I feel there is an intervention that is needed, but I will not act as a postmaster. So it helps both ways because I'm able to focus on things that are important, expected of my role. Uh, the other person gets a chance to build their own space and visibility. So it's a win-win outcome, right? Even if people are coming from the team, while I understand about skip level feedbacks, but I will still, my first instance would be to redirect the person to their respective leaders to ask that, have you spoken to the person? So through some of these little steps, I ensure that the authority of the person remains. And uh, and I'm there to coach and support rather than taking decisions on their behalf. There have been instances wherein um, there were a couple of approaches which a person would have taken. They ask for my advice. I tell them, I'll let you take your decision. These are the pros and cons that I see, but I let the person take the decision because ultimately they have to bear the consequences on back of it. Because this is the best way of learning, right? If I take decisions for someone, then they may not learn out of it. By taking their own decisions and seeing the consequences, you may learn. So, of course, unless it is going totally wrong, that's wherein I will step in and I might have to use my authority that, no, I don't think this is how it should be done. But most of the time, I say that take your decision and I'm there to support you. So, these are avenues through which I try to create their psychological safety, let them take their decisions and be more as a coach and a mentor.
What's the first thing that you did as soon as you became manager?
So first thing is like, I think taking my, having conversations with my next layer, and letting them know that while I've been promoted into this role, I will need their support to make me successful in this role. And if I will need their help to understand their areas better. It's more of a discovery process, understanding and asking questions and being curious, rather than being in a urgency to show my impacts and my authority.
Amazing. Yeah. So have those conversations early on, as soon as you're getting into the role, and then what I'm also noticing is walk the talk. So on the one hand, you're talking and say, hey, you know what, I'm here for you. But on the other hand, if you shortchange them in jumping into every decision and not giving them the support and say, well, that done. So you're setting it up well. So first you're saying, this is what I'm going to do. And then you're doing it. And so the respect that people have for you. Because I think it must have been a bit of a test. Also, the minute you went up, although there was some, quite a bit of credibility from before, but there's always a test. So people are watching and seeing what is it that you're saying, say versus do ratio.
Yeah.
So that's kind of going high.
So one thing, if I can add, is that also I use them as my trusted advisors, right?
Wow.
So
taking advice on them?
Yes. So if there are certain situations wherein I'm thinking I need sounding boards, so I know where their strengths lie. So depending upon their strengths, I use them as trusted advisors and sounding boards. And thereafter, I think it just takes the relationship to a very strong next level.
Well, this is interesting because when you said earlier on, when I asked you that question about how do you manage your energy, you said I had some good trusted sounding boards, right? Now, when you said that, my mind instantly reacted saying, I didn't say this, verbalize it, but I said, so it was like people who are, higher up in the hierarchy than you or at a same peer level. I did not think that your sounding boards could also be your team. So, and then I noticed and realized similar principles coming through because what you mentioned about how you deal with the stakeholders in the 30, 60, 90-day plan is also happening here, and you're observing these guys. You're, in this case, understanding their aspirations, priorities, but also understanding their strengths. So I think if somebody follows that, you're gonna, the chances that you get it right are going to be pretty high. So coming back rather to the old boundary bit, this is being touted as a big one. How do you set boundaries? People still, slap me on the back and still think I'm just a, punk chum. How do you set up those boundaries that, hey, hold on a second. Or are you saying you set that up before you became a manager? How do you set up those boundaries that, hey, I'm friendly? Because again, I see it's a bit of a dance. It's on the one hand, being approachable and open. You don't completely shut up. Because then people are going to say, hey, at the minute she became a manager, she doesn't talk to us anymore. So you got to maintain that open door, transparent approachability. But on the other hand, you're also saying, but hold on, there is a line, don't cross it. How do you do that? Maybe you can give an example or something.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing which is very important to understand is that people typically don't have problem with feedbacks and boundaries if they trust your intention.
Okay, what does that mean?
So the thing is that if someone very close to you comes and tells you that, you know what are you doing? You're not doing a great job. You are listening and you want to, you'll actually think about it rather than it coming from someone whom you don't trust, right? So I think the foundation for all the different conversations, be it feedback, be it boundaries, is trust. Right? So probably day one is not when I'll form the boundary. First, my focus is on building relationships, right? Once I feel that I have the foundation of trust, that's when I can have a conversation about the boundary. To take an example, I remember this one of my direct, he was like a enthusiastic cutlet. And typically I would get a message from him about a problem at 9:30 in the night, right? The problem was, while I appreciated his enthusiasm that even at that hour he was thinking of stuff that could be improved upon, but it wasn't a good timing for me because it would at times just disrupt my peace of mind at that hour. So I would just have a conversation with him that I mean, really nice of you to spend so much of personal time also thinking about these things, but just why don't we have some of these conversations in the morning or during the office hours, because at that time it is just disrupting my my peace time, right? So but it was on the bedrock of a solid relationship that I had with him, so he didn't mind at all. He just respected that, and we started discussing all that stuff at a different hour.
That's so amazing. So first you're saying you're setting up a good relationship. That's your focus. Now that's the first step. Now it's like preparing the soil.
Yeah.
You won't put the seed in the soil, barren, rocky soil, and you're not getting anything. So setting up the soil nicely, setting up the relationships. Now you can start, okay. To me, a lot of times when boundary setting happens, some confrontation is required. A lot of times when I say confront, people think negative. Over here, this is one of the ways to make it more positive, confront positive. When you say, I've got a solid emotional bank account set up with this guy. We're not all logical creatures. We cannot weigh everything logically. So sometimes, even though I'm telling something very logical to the other person, but if I don't have a solid, rock solid emotion bank account, that's just going to fall on my words, is going to seeds just going to fall on rocky barren soil and not fructify, and you're wondering, why doesn't that person listen to me? Oh, somebody else said that person listens. I say that the person doesn't listen. And I think that's coming from a place of, I haven't prepared the soil well enough. I haven't built that relation well enough.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. What's one mantra of giving good feedback?
I think mantra of giving good feedback, I think it has to be there and then. When I say there and then, I think I want to rephrase. It not necessarily spot feedback, but very close to the instance. Yeah. Because it's very fresh in a person's mind, so they can relate to it better. If you give after some time, then they may have lost the context behind it because they didn't think it was important. So I think spot feedbacks are very good. But at the same time, I want to be careful when I say that, because if there's fire that is on, you don't want to distract people by giving spot feedback. So, but when the fire has come down, that's when you should give, because that's when people will appreciate that. And when you have formal feedback discussion, actually, it should be more of a summary of feedbacks that have been shared. So it becomes a much easier.
Surprise.
It should come as a surprise. So it should become a summary of the discussions that you would have had by that time. So that's how I say it.
So from feedback, three things: spot feedback, but not if I'm just writing this down. Not if a fire is on. And thirdly, you said that when you sit down for a formal, proper, long drawn out feedback, fewer surprises.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe you can't make zero surprises, but try to get to there. So that it's a kind of a summary of the different feedback pieces of feedback that you've been giving across span of time. Okay, so that's feedback. Now I want to go to the second case study question. Although the first question threw up so many different things, the second one is, I'm sure you've done many interviews, taken, hired a lot of people. When we go into an interview, there are two kinds of questions that get asked. Question number one, type of question number one, is technical based questions. So if I'm hiring somebody for finance, I'm checking to see that person's finance essentials are there. If I'm hiring somebody for, let's say, technology or coding, then I will check that. If I'm hiring somebody for let's say manufacturing or something like that, then I want to check that part. So that's a technical aspect. If I'm hiring a lawyer, then I want to check that person knows all the sections and contractual law, etc. But then there's the other part, the behavioral side of the interview. When you're taking an interview, what are 2-3 really important questions for you? What are you checking for? These 2-3 questions really tell you that's the kind of person I want. Or, hey, hold on a second, I don't want that person.
Yeah, so interesting. So certain set of questions, which are my favorites, which I'll end up asking most of the times when I'm interviewing, is
So why would I have to change this question?
yeah, seriously.
Anybody sees this? Oh, you know what you're going to ask.
So, I think one of my favorite question is that give me an example when you have failed. So when they tell me about the situation, it is about understanding that how they handle the entire situation, because that tells a lot about the person. Because eventually, I think when you do something different, naturally you'll make mistakes, right? But how do you deal with it to move forward? So that gives you a kind of an idea in terms of how this person would deal with crisis. I think this is one of my favorite question, their attitude towards dealing with it.
Yeah, because if you ask, sorry to interrupt, but if you ask, how do you give an instance of when you failed, and the person is just giving you example, I've seen this going happening a whole bunch of times. The person's giving examples of how they achieved success. So the relationship with failure, then not wanting to acknowledge it, running away from it, stepping back, not wanting to show, so they're not open or transparent and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Even recognizing it was a failure, I would typically ask, why do you think it was a failure, right? So it gives you a lot of insight in terms of what you expected of yourself, because of which you deemed it a failure, and how did you come out of it? What are the things that you had to take back? So I think I get a lot of sense in terms of the perspective that the person brings in.
I even love your second question. Why do you think that's a failure? So you're checking to see that person's thought process.
Yes, thought process, yes. The second one would be, I typically ask them to explain their stakeholder map to me. Who are their stakeholders? And then I have a follow-up question that who was the trickiest stakeholder to manage in this map, and why? Because that also gives me a sense in terms of what is the approach of this person to manage the stakeholders, how the person views his or her stakeholders, what are the challenges or areas that they may struggle with. So I ask this question. The third one would be around where do you see yourself 5 years from now? So the reason why I ask this question is it gives me a view on how strategic this person is, right? Do you forget where the organization is heading? Do you know where you are heading? Do you have that clarity? And my follow-up question is that, okay, if this is where you want to be after 5 years, then how are you going to make this happen? So basically, what is your awareness on if you have certain goal in mind, how do you achieve it, right? So what clarity do you bring in? And even level of maturity. It is not very easy to look ahead, right? So there are...
I imagine. If a person's not very mature, then you're probably going to just answer.
Yeah.
That answer is going to tell you as a person thought it through.
Yes, absolutely. You get a sight of how ambitious the person is.
Yeah.
How far can you look ahead? If you're able to look ahead, then how much of clarity do you have to break down steps to achieve it? So it gives me a view on, again, the
Even though that's a very often asked question, but the way you're looking at it is it gives you so much of info. Like, can the person think analytically?
Yeah.
Can the person think in process and steps?
Yes.
How mature is a person that I?
Yeah.
So I love the way you're looking at that.
Yeah.
Amazing. So what you said is where next in 5 years? How do you look at failure? Tell me a time when failed. What's
The third one was about the stakeholders.
stakeholder map?
Yeah.
And how do the follow-up? So I'm also noticing that you have a couple of follow-up questions. So which is the toughest, stickiest stakeholder?
Yeah.
How you?
Yeah. And why was the person toughest? And what do you do to manage such a stakeholder? Those kind of questions.
You managed to create quite a bit of a brand for yourself, credibility for yourself. In the previous organization, in this organization, whoever I've spoken to, at a team level, at a peer level, at the stakeholder level. So I want to dip into that. This is my next, one of my last case study questions is that, is this whole bit about creating a brand. So the premise that I'm operating out of is that hard work only will not take you to the top. If you want it quicker, faster, better. Because let's face it, everybody's working hard. Today, I mean, if you go out, it's very difficult to find a bad car on the road. It's very difficult to find a bad cell phone on the roads. It's difficult to find a bad courier service. So services, products, whatever. So just doing hard work was a great thing 30, 40 years ago. Just getting a product to work well was a exotic thing 30, 40, 50 years ago. Your service to deliver was a great deal. Not so today. Because competition is so tough that, if you're not up to spec, if you're not doing a good job, you're going to be out of the door. In fact, a lot of people are given the pink slip out of the door, even after doing a good job. A lot of people after doing a good job are not promoted as quickly. And I remember that, I'm sure you've heard this. Hey, that guy, he doesn't know stuff as well as I, but that girl, and the minute she opens her mouth, she just takes the audience and something like she does. So my endeavor is to try and unpack, demystify that something. What's that something? I think it's related to building a personal brand. Now, where I normally use personal brand, it's you normally think of a leader having that brand and charisma. Do you think focusing on one's own personal brand is important at first-time manager level, at a manager level? Is that important? And can a person, so the multiple questions were, can a person actually start building the brand once you're at an assistant manager, first-time manager level? And what are a couple of things that a person can do? I don't mean technical, because I'm technical, very specific. So what are some of the things a person can do in order to build one's brand?
So, in my view, the brand is being formed all the time, consciously or unconsciously.
Whether you want it or not.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, when we talk about first-time managers, I think the question is not whether they should have a brand. Actually, the thing is they have a brand, consciously or unconsciously. The only thing is that do you want to work upon it consciously? I think that's the choice that you have.
Okay.
Right? And I mean, the fact that when I look at someone, I may say that, oh, this guy is trustworthy, or I don't know what this guy does. Even if I ask him to do something, I don't know whether he's going to get back or not. Right? This basically speaks of you, which is the brand, right? So I think it's no-brainer that relationships or opportunities. Let's bring it the other way around. You may be very good in what you do, but unless you have opportunities, you don't have points in time to demonstrate how good you are.
Good.
And opportunities can come to you via your relationships, right? So if you take an example of the game of snakes and ladder, this is my favorite example, right? So if I mean, my view is that it represents life, right? The only the fun part is that you can create as many snakes as you want and you can create as many ladders as you want, right? So all your burnt relationships represent snakes and all your good relationships represent ladders. And if you're a person who doesn't believe in forming relationships, be it bond, be it the good ones, you will just, you're just gradually, slowly moving on the board, right? So that's the importance that relationship brings in. The good relationships are the bedrock to that is the trust that you build, which essentially is on back of the brand that you bring in, right? So that's why I think brand building is important. So I think what you need to be aware of that how you want to be seen vis-a-vis how you are being seen,
Yeah.
right? So introspecting how you are being seen, why is that? Don't just disregard it as a perception. It is very much there's no smoke without fire, so you need to check that why that brand is there. Also, the thing is that what you want to be seen, what are the conscious efforts that you'll put in place for that brand to be visible. It could be, to take an example, if you want to be seen as a SME in a particular technology, then you want to go out and hold certain sessions, participate in conferences, actively talk to SMEs about it, drive certain changes on back of it so that you're recognized as a SME on this, right? You may feel that you are a SME, but if other people don't see you as a SME, actually, you will not get anything on back of it. So that's where your brand and explicit effort on your brand plays a huge role.
Yeah, so, okay. So, lots of things happening. This first is mindset. That, what do I want to be seen as? What am I seen as? What's the differential? Right. Then there is action, building relationships. There is action of forums. And what I kind of get is that there's a bit of a premise that I have, and I'm testing this. I don't know right, wrong. But what I think, yes, relationships are important. There's no but to that. Yes, relationships are important. When it comes to a personal brand, especially for somebody working within an organization, my premise is that the more you're known outside the organization, in a similar space, right, the more your respect grows for you within an organization. Right? So the minute you start telling me about forums and doing stuff outside, being known for, the word thought leader bubbles to the surface, being known for a subject, talking to subject matter experts. Maybe you're not the expert, but maybe you're the expert at interviewing somebody. So really building your visibility, know-how, credibility, personal brand outside the organization gets you to be noticed more and more and more inside and out. So what do you feel when I say that? What do you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you are, participating in at industry level forums, that means your expertise is at a certain level, right? That's only you can meaningfully contribute to these external forums, and you'll be basically earning respect on back of that, right? But I personally feel that is not the only avenue. That is one of the avenue. Even within your, at whichever level you are, you can choose to make a difference at a level which is above that. If you're in a team, can you do something at a business unit level? You can choose to do something with a wider organization level. You can choose to do something within the industry, because you will have your own level of maturity. And as you mature, the level at which you participate can change. But start from somewhere, wherever you are.
That also answers the question, how can a manager think strategic? If you're thinking at least one level above, there's an interesting exercise. I just wanted to talk about that for a minute. That I do in my workshops, when I'm doing the initial workshop, I call it the 2-up to-do list. So you make your to-do list, then think of your stakeholder, at least 2 levels above you, and go and create that person's to right or wrong, doesn't matter. Just go and create, what do you think that person's to-do list is? And just writing that out, and that kind of visualization game gives you so much clarity. Oh my God, there's this differential or not that exists, and then maybe these are some of the things that I need to pick up just by becoming a little bit sentient to what my stakeholder, what my 2-up is kind of doing. So that's one of the ways I completely agree. How do you create your personal brand even when you're just becoming a manager? Okay, so want to move now to from the case studies, quick rapid fire round as we come to a close, right? And My first one is, what advice would the Taru of today give the Taru of, let's say, 22 years ago? Why?
Yeah, so I think the advice that I would give is I think refrain from perfection. Perfection, yeah. I've realized that it's very expensive. And I think the difference between being good and being perfect, the difference isn't much, but the amount of effort that it takes to move from good to perfection can be very taxing on you and people around you, right? So I think that's the advice that I would like.
What does that mean? If you could just unpack it.
To take an example, I mean, to take an example, if I want to be a super mom, a super sister, super daughter, super wife, a super professional, right? It can get very, very taxing, right? But allowing a window for you to fail is very important, right? It's taxing both from an effort perspective. It's taxing also from a mental agony perspective when you failed to be perfect. Yeah. So, and also in your aspiration to be perfect, you could be taxing not just yourself, but people around you.
I will really beautiful example.
Yeah, to take an example, I am I am a cleanliness freak, right?
Okay.
So if I've got kids in the house and, I'm just busy cleaning the house because I'm a cleanliness freak rather than just giving some time to them, right? Probably that's not the best use of my time, right? So somewhere you have to draw boundaries between, this is what is needed in terms of from a hygiene perspective. You keep your house nice and clean, but don't go crazy about it because you want it to be perfect.
Yeah. There's a question that forms over there. And I think, what's the best use of my time?
Yeah.
That kind of question is guiding this kind of responses. All right, cool.
Yeah.
So that's the don't worry about perfection. Something like that?
Yeah.
Let's okay. Guilt versus potential.
Oh, yes.
I don't know what I mean by that. So let me just unpack it for our listeners. As diversity and inclusion grows, a lot of the women are taking up larger and larger and larger roles, becoming CEOs and C-suite and that. So that's potential. Fulfilling, I don't mean CEO's potential equals CEO equals potential, no. For some it does. So that's really unpacking your potential, right? Maybe money, role, success. From a very professional standpoint, I'm looking at potential. That's, you could look at potential in 100 other ways, or 1,000 maybe. So really doing your best, outshining the others, growing the hierarchical corporate ladder. So that's how I'm looking at potential. On the other hand, it is taking care of the house, kids, and so on and so forth. A lot of times, ladies, women face that dilemma. If they go to one end of it, as in they focus on the potential, there's something pulling them towards the other. And oh my God, what about the house and so, etc. My kids are not. And if they're going towards, taking care more and more of the house, but you know what, I'm missing on so much of opportunity there, and I wish. So how have you managed this whole pendulum?
Well, I've not been great at it, but now that I look back, I do have certain theories on how I could have done it better. So what I personally feel is that the guilt element can come out of two things. One is you physically not being actually able to undertake certain things that have to be done, or the other thing could be emotional management because of the expectations that you have of yourself and managing expectations of people around you, right? All of these factors can lead to guilt. So it has to be actively managed, and you have to acquire skills to manage this. So I think one good way to go about is to have a strong network, right? Women who've already done that, right? So frankly speaking, I believe that, with so many successful women being around, we are not the only ones who are doing it. There are people who've done it. And I'm sure they've used certain mantras to manage this. A lot of us live in nuclear family, and not just women. I'm sure even men had to juggle. So they've done that. So having a strong network to understand how did they manage and being open to their ideas, trying out things, so that you are able to emotionally manage yourself, people around you better, and also you're able to delegate more, use help and support that is available so that you can take care of certain activities around you. And at the same time, it is also about at some point in time drawing boundaries, because you have to keep yourself happy, because if you're not happy, you can't make other people happy. So being slightly selfish and maybe keeping at least half an hour a day or something wherein you are doing what you want to do to maintain your energy levels, and then you can support all other expectations around you. So these are certain things that come to mind.
As you respond to that, what I notice is that at the core, and I'm beginning to see a pattern emerge, at the core of what's really helped you is three pieces. Could be more, but to me, three pieces stand out. One is the whole idea of reaching out to people, asking for help, the whole network, the relationships. You can just say, I think that's the word, relationships, and using it in different sounding boards to ask for help, to help you with your dilemmas and so on and so forth. So relationships is important. Self-awareness is the other, and boundaries is the third. That to me is, because this is giving rise to your energy, to your time, to helping you cope with. And I'm sure it's a work in progress. And then there's also this whole mindset about not being perfect. That's kind of playing a whole big role in that. Okay, cool. So from there, I will move to saying, what's your rich life?
I think my rich life would definitely be traveling around the world, and even staying maybe in some places so that I can experience the culture. So it's about, meeting people from different cultures, experiencing the food, the way of life. So I think rich life to me is about, being on the go, staying, experimenting, just meeting people and enriching myself.
Like 6 months, 1 year?
Yeah, I think not probably 1 year, but maybe at least 4 to 5 months, because that will give you enough window to see how people in different parts of the world live their life.
Nice.
Right? So I think that will be interesting perspective to just take, digest.
Yeah, absolutely. Something after my own heart. I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that for a year. I just want to go off for a year, not touch my cell phone and stuff. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but yeah, that's what I would like to do. So we're drawing to a close now. I think one or two left. And this is what I call my matrix question. In the matrix, you see the matrix?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So in the matrix, there's this whole, so Keanu Reeves, Neo, is able to learn how to use guns, how to do martial arts, how to speak different languages, I think, and so on and so forth. Like in the blink of an eye, like in 5 minutes, you can, own ninjutsu, you learn in 5 minutes. People took a whole lifetime, 5 minute tuck is done. So, and I find myself wishing that I wish I was like Neo and I could pick up a whole bunch of stuff that I could learn. For example, for me, it is investigative journalism. I just want to, really go and learn that. I just don't have the time for it. So what's something that you feel, I wish I had access to the matrix, and this is something I just could pick up in 5 minutes, but it just takes a whole bunch of time. What's something like that?
So I think certain bits that are sitting in my priority list are going through the Hindu spiritual texts like the Vedas, the Upanishads, right? I wish I could just go through all of them, all the the sutras.
Wow.
Yeah, and it takes time to read them and reflect on them. So I wish I could zip it like they did in Matrix. I think that would be fantastic. The other thing is also about probably money management better. So yeah, so this is something which I've been particularly good at. So I think getting those skills in terms of developing a better sense towards managing your money. And the third bit will definitely be about AI, because that takes you to the future. That's the in thing, right? So I think making more progress in terms of building my understanding on the deep learning models, etc. How can I use those?
Yeah, that's interesting. As we go, last question. Any last message for aspiring managers, young managers, people with just a few years experience as a manager, or just about to become a manager? Any parting message for them?
I think my message will be that as you become a manager, your success will depend on how good your team is, right? So I think just make sure that you are someone who is able to build a high performing team. So I think that is very important. The second thing will be this is where your journey to strategy will begin, right? And to develop the strategic thought process, it just start by practice. So do you have understanding of what will happen in 6 months' time? Do you have understanding of what would happen in 1 year's time, or what is expected to happen in your respective organization in 1 year time? Horizon 1.5, 2 years, so things like that. The and then thereafter the lens will be what as per you should happen, right? So that's where you graduate your forward-looking thinking. A, first understanding what are other people thinking about it, and B is having your own view on what it should be.
So on you. Oh, that's
Yeah. So that's where you will practice and eventually move away from just pure execution to delivering what is being asked of you today or next 1 or 2 months to somewhere who's got a view and you can, suggest on what should be done as we move forward.
Taru, thank you so much for taking the time out once more. And,
Thank you.
yeah, we've had a lovely chat. I've learned a lot. I've learned how to, deal with that 30, 60, 90 day. I've learned this last piece that we just spoke of, it's so important to have a view, and having that view can translate into being strategic, how to be strategic. So lots of learning just jam-packed in there. I think, most of my questions have been for first-time managers, people just becoming a manager. But I think there's board in sitting in here, even if you're in mid-management, even if you're in senior management, or, you've become a leader, how to deal with a few things. So I think there's a lot of gold in your responses. So thank you very much, though.
Thank you, Greg, for having me here.